Welcome into the College Football Recruiting Show. I am Emily Proud. Please hit that like button if you have not already, and make sure that you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We have a big show for you today. OT7 camps are happening, recruiting buzz, and the transfer portal still in full swing. So here's what's on tap. Our Director of Scouting joins us to recap the top performers at OT7 Orlando, and there could be a battle brewing for the top quarterback in 2025. Plus, we check in with Oklahoma recruiting and get the latest in transfer portal news as the spring window closes, marking the official end of this cycle. But first, let's welcome on Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins, here to break down the OT7 camp in his own backyard in Orlando. Let's start with the #1 quarterback in the class. That is LSU commit quarterback Bryce Underwood. You called his performance this weekend a masterclass. He was named the Alpha Dog. What did he do to stand out?
Well, Emily, it's more of what didn't he do. I mean, it was a loaded field of quarterbacks. I think we had 6 inside the top 247, a few more Power 4 commits. This is a lot of guys we like. And on Sunday, Bryce Underwood stole the show. I thought he balanced risk and reward like a seasoned pro. You know, and he never really put the ball in a bad position, but at the same time, you know, he threaded the needle and he threw his wide receivers open. He ended up leading his team all the way to the semifinals. They didn't advance to the finals. They were playing low pro, which is kind of a group that schematically is very difficult for opponents to defend. They won a ton of 7-on-7 games, but Bryce played lights out in that game. I mean, he had just a handful of incompletions, multiple long touchdown passes. I thought it was an excellent performance for Bryce Underwood, and he kind of needed this. You know, we haven't seen him yet on the offseason camp circuit. The last game for him was back on Thanksgiving weekend, which is a loss in the state finals. If you dig into the tape, you go back and you watch Bryce Underwood up there in Michigan in the finals. That final drive, he's probably going to want it back. It was 4 or 5 bad throws in a row when he had a chance to tie the game and potentially win another state title. So it was important for Bryce Underwood. We don't know yet if he's going to be at the Elite 11 finals this summer, but for him to come out on Sunday and look like the real deal was certainly encouraging to us.
Yeah, you know, it's been a while since we've seen him, since most of the video we have of him is the snow falling down from those championship games in Michigan, but hopefully the weather much better in Orlando. Let's talk about another quarterback. That's Tavian St. Clair. He is, of course, committed to Ohio State. He was in attendance. What's the likelihood that he could potentially challenge Bryce Underwood for that top spot?
Well, Emily, I'm going to let you in on a secret behind the scenes at 24/7 Sports. And this is my second straight weekend seeing Tavian St. Clair. I was up in Columbus for the Elite 11 Regional last weekend, and then he comes down to my backyard. We traded places. He was at the OT7 event. And there's some chatter starting about a potential change at the top. Tavian St. Clair, this is a kid that we really, really like. He's got a prototypical frame. He is all of 6'4", 220 pounds, and he's got a really loose stroke, and he can touch all different corners of the field. I loved him at that Elite 11 Regional, and then when we see him at this OT7 tournament, you know, I thought there were some encouraging things. He did throw some interceptions, but you have to remember Tavian St. Clair, because of those Ohio High School Association rules, he's never really played 7-on-7 football. He told me this was his first ever club tournament. He's only played a few with his high school, and those were normally at Ohio State. So, you know, there were some peaks and some valleys, but overall, encouraging performance. You know, challenge tight coverage windows, made some high-level throws, and he's going to be at the Elite 11 finals this summer. Hopefully, we're going to see him and Bryce Underwood go at it there. But yes, I do think that there's potentially, you know, room for change at the top. You know, Tavian St. Clair sitting in the top 10 for us in the rankings. We're way higher on him than the rest of the industry. I would not be surprised if other people corrected and he moves up their board. But Tavian St. Clair, I mean, Ohio State's getting a really, really good quarterback.
I love it. I appreciate you giving me the inside information. I should let you know we are recording this, so there may be some other people that learn that as well. But we always love the peek behind the curtain when it comes to those scouting meetings. Meanwhile, Notre Dame, #1 class in 2025. They have a ton of recruits. One of them is a quarterback commit in Deuce Knight. He was also there in attendance. What did you take away from his performance this weekend?
Well, Emily, Deuce Knight's a guy I've seen throw multiple times already this offseason. I saw him at the Under Armour camp there in Orlando. Cooper Patagna, my good buddy, saw him at the Elite 11 regional in Mississippi. He thought Deuce was awesome there. And I'm going to be honest, this was the best I've ever seen from Deuce Saturday at the OT7. He's a athletic lefty, and I think he's a bit streaky as a passer, but when he's on, he is on. And that was the case day one during pool play. One of the games he went 8 for 8 for 160 yards and 4 touchdowns. The ball never touched the ground. I mean, he threw back-to-back 40-yard touchdown passes. He was excellent. Sunday, took a little step back, struggled with the ball placement. But I think when you think about Notre Dame's quarterback room and what they've brought in, C.J. Carr, Kenny Minchey 2 years before that, under the direction of Marcus Freeman, Deuce Knight's the guy that gets me fired up, and that's because I think he has the highest ceiling of the bunch. He is an elite tester, 4.6 in the 40-yard dash, 4.5 in the short shuttle, 42-inch vertical jump. Those would be top metrics at the NFL scouting combine. But he doesn't want to beat you all the time with his legs. He wants to stand back there and fire the football over the middle. You know, we're going to update our rankings here in the coming weeks. I think Deuce Knight is going to be a riser for us. I think this was really encouraging, stacking those performances back to back. We'll see what he looks like as a senior, but I think if you're a Notre Dame fan, you got to be fired up about Deuce Knight. He can paint the targets, he can get it deep, and then again, obviously he can beat you with his legs as well.
If you're a Notre Dame fan, you should be excited about the quarterback position in general. I feel like we've talked a lot about some big-time recruits coming in there. These guys have to have somebody to throw the ball to. So who are some pass catchers that stood out?
Vernell Brown, out of Orlando Jones High School. I thought he was the top wide receiver at the tournament. He is a guy that can win with his release, and he's got the burst, the lateral quickness, and in this 7-on-7 tournaments, it's two-hand touch. Actually, it's one-hand touch. So, you know, it's hard to produce chunks of yardage once the football is in your hands, but Vernell Brown was one of those guys that could do just that. Also went both ways, one of the few players in the tournament. I mean, most of these rosters are loaded with blue chippers, so, you know, you have your starting offense, your starting defense. Vernell Brown pulled double duty, and that's what he does on Friday nights. I think when we think about where football is right now, we all just watch the NFL draft. If you're going to be undersized, you have to have some juice. Vernell Brown brings that to the table. Ohio State leads on the crystal ball for him. But he told me, and I thought this was the case over the weekend, you know, his dad played at Florida. He's also got a sister that runs track at Florida. So I think the Gators, along with Miami and Florida State, someone else to watch out for with Vernell Brown. And then how about Jace Brown? No relation. This is a kid from out in California, Warren Downey High School. That's where Nico Iamalieva, who was hanging out on the sidelines this weekend, that's where he went to school. Jace Brown, a potential riser for us in the rankings. He's a big-framed pass catcher, made a number of contested catches on the outside. Only 500 yards receiving this past season, but I think he's a guy where once college coaches dig into the tape, he has a chance to move up recruiting boards. Reminds me a little bit of Jacoby Lane, who is now at USC. Sounds like he's going to have a big 2024 season, but he's this large-framed wide receiver, and he's got really, really good testing metrics, so I thought he had a great tournament. And then how about Bryce Underwood's favorite target, LSU commit Harlem Berry, our number 2 ranked running back. This might be the fastest prospect in the class of 2025. He went 4.37 in the 40-yard dash last summer at Under Armour's Future 50 event. He played wide receiver, and he just roasted opposing defensive backs. Just deep touchdown after deep touchdown after deep touchdown. He, too, you know, was able to reverse fields with the ball in his hand. I thought it was an encouraging performance for Harlem Berry. He's a guy that on Saturdays and potentially Sundays is going to have 3-down capability with his hands.
I love it. I noticed you sprinkled in a little recruiting news there, doing it all with the scouting and recruiting. That's why we love to get the intel from these events. If they weren't, you know, maybe guarding Harlem Berry, because it sounds like nobody had success against him, there were a lot of defensive backs there in attendance. Who are some prospects that we need to know about?
Yeah, it was, again, there's a lot of blue chippers, a lot of kids inside the top 247. I didn't think any of the corners had like a excellent event, and that wasn't expected. I mean, you heard the list of the quarterbacks, you know the wide receivers that were there. But how about these safeties? And I'm going to give you 3 of them. Our top-ranked safety, Trey McNutt, I thought he had the best weekend out of anyone in coverage. Had a pick 6, got his hand on multiple passes. He's a high IQ football player. He's a plus athlete. He will bait signal callers into making bad decisions, and he's one of those guys that has the ability to recover and close that gap and then make a play on the football. His recruitment remains wide open. Just took a visit to Florida. He's also been out to Oregon. I was just kind of bouncing some different things off him. He's looking for the right scheme fit. Obviously, Ohio State's the in-state school, but I'm interested to see what direction this goes because I think he can fit a variety of different schemes. So he's the first safety. The second one, Ladarian Clarity out of the Panhandle in Florida. This is a guy, personal favorite recruit of mine behind the scenes. We put him in the top 247 when he had, I don't think, any Power 4 offers. Well, now he's got one from Georgia. He's going to take an official visit to Washington, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. All these schools are involved, and it was easy to see why over the weekend. 2 pick 6s, was excellent in man coverage. I think that is so important for that safety position right now with everyone wanting to air it out. Yeah, you got to be able to hit people and fill in and run support, but can you man up with one of these quicker slot targets and cover them down the field? Ladarian Clarity did just that. I think he's a name to know for sure. His recruiting stock is only going to elevate. And then finally, Bryce Fitzgerald, kind of the same mold as these two. High IQ football player, takes sharp angles in coverage. He too went both ways, had a few interceptions, had a few touchdowns. He's down at Miami, Columbus in South Florida. UF, USC, I think Stanford's in there as well. Young for his class. He's on the younger side, multi-sport background. I mean, that is all what we want to see in him. So I also thought Bryce Fitzgerald had a big weekend as well.
Thank you, Andrew. You can check out more analysis from Andrew Ivins and Cooper Patagna on the Football Recruiting Podcast. New episodes drop every Tuesday and Wednesday. You can watch live at noon Eastern on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel or listen wherever you get your podcasts. We are still pretty early in the 2025 recruiting cycle. A lot can and will happen between now and December, but so far, number 1 Notre Dame still off to that hot start with 20 total commits. Closely behind them with the highest per player rating is Ohio State, but the focus of our next segment, we put it in bold there for you, is the number 6 class in Oklahoma. So let's head to somewhere, I guess in driving distance of Norman, Oklahoma. That part of the country is not really my specialty when it comes to the geography, but we are welcoming in our friend Collin Kennedy from Sooners Illustrated. CK, I guess OU, I hear, has landed 4 commitments in this month alone. What's causing all of the recent success?
In one word, genuine. More on that in a second, but to further your point with a little bit more context, you mentioned 4 commits in 2025 alone in the month of April. 7 total commits in April between the transfer portal all the way to the 2027 recruiting cycle. More on both of those in a second. But when it comes to 2025 and these guys that are making a ton of decisions right now, the word is genuine because literally it's one of the first words these recruits mentioned to me when I asked them to describe this coaching staff. And it's a firm belief of everyone employed at OU in that football facility right now. They are trying to become and continuing to be one of the more relational, open, honest, transparent coaching staffs in college football. I think recruits appreciate that. This sport right now is becoming more transactional than ever before. And so to continue to prioritize and build relationships, it pays off. You're seeing the proof in the pudding. And somehow the statistics prove Brent Venables and crew are recruiting at a higher level than former head coach Lincoln Riley. And as long as they stay on this current trend, I don't see this changing anytime soon, the way that they treat recruits and their families.
I mean, they hope that the start to the spring could continue in the month of April. I know that Sooners fans are waiting to hear an update about top 247 cornerback Kobe Sellers. He is set to announce his finalists, I believe, on Tuesday. So where do the Sooners stand in the race for his services? Yeah,
this recruitment's heating up a little bit. The timeline might be accelerating. And if you're an Oklahoma fan or even in that Oklahoma facility that I was talking about earlier, you're probably getting to the edge of your seat because if that's the case, Oklahoma has been seen as the leader for several months, and rightfully so. Every time Kobe goes to campus, those trips go incredibly well. He's built very strong relationships within Oklahoma's coaching staff and on the current roster. A number of the other recruits currently committed are constantly recruiting Kobe himself. And I think this is one that OU has felt a time or two they were just on the verge of locking down. But in the words of the great Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. I do have a crystal ball in for Oklahoma, Emily. But I actually think Texas A&M is making a serious push here behind the scenes. Some of those commits we talked about earlier, they landed 2 cornerbacks in the month of April, did Oklahoma. And I think as that happened, as that took place, Texas A&M worked behind the scenes to recruit Kobe, and it's paid off. Had a conversation with a few sources. I think Kobe's thoroughly impressed with that new A&M coaching staff. He had a prior relationship with Jordan Peterson, who's on staff. He was very impressed with some of the other defensive back staffers currently in College Station. And so I like how Oklahoma has treated this recruiting process for months, but A&M's really made a push going down the stretch here. And so if that timeline is getting accelerated, and I have some news very soon on that front, it could become a battle between Oklahoma and Texas A&M.
All right, well, at the very least, we'll find out his finalists tomorrow. Looking forward to hearing that. Outside of him, just overall looking at the Sooners class, 14 total commitments, number 6 in the nation. Fantastic start. So what's next?
Yeah, I'm going to first start with an in-state offensive lineman, Anthony Ogamoro, just down the road in Elgin, Oklahoma, set to make a decision on May 21st, so going into next month. Where do things stand? I like Oklahoma put in a crystal ball. OU offensive line recruiting, heavily discussed this cycle after a strong defensive line haul, wanting to continue to shore up those lines of scrimmage. I think Oklahoma's in a prime position here with an intriguing prospect in state. Anthony Ogamoro hasn't been playing football long, but especially after his trip to Norman for the spring game, I think Oklahoma's in the driver's seat here. He'll continue to take visits, but OU might be able to add an offensive frontliner to the cycle very soon. CJ Nixon, another in-state recruit who doesn't get talked about a ton, mainly because he kind of keeps to himself, but in talking to sources, OU's still very confident in the way things are going there. And then I think if you're Oklahoma, you're going to continue to figure out what other spots you want to fill and fill fast, because on that note of the 2025 cycle and all these commits coming in, a storyline that's emerged out of Norman is relatively sticky when it comes to scholarship spots right now. They have 14. Don't think they can take much more than 21 to 23 unless they really work the numbers. So I think that's the other thing that's next for Oklahoma. How are they going to navigate these scholarship numbers as they prepare for official visit season and even some pending decisions going into the month of May?
So that's a near-term future question, but I have to ask you this. This really stood out to me watching defensive lineman Zane Rowe from the 2027 class committing to Oklahoma recently. 2027, I believe those are freshmen, rising sophomores. It's going to be a long time until we see him play college football for Oklahoma, but what was it that made this staff want to lock him up so early?
Literally everything. But the more in-depth answer would basically be this. If there's a 2027 recruit out there who checks more boxes than Zane Rowe, I definitely like to see that recruit because that's part of my job. But specifically in the state of Texas, Emily, this 2027 cycle, I've said this on social media a couple of times, I don't know what it is, but there's already a ton of 27s in Texas who look like they're paying mortgages. I don't know what kind of water they're drinking. I would like some. But Zane Rowe is chief among them, and it's fascinating because you look at him, 6'4", 220, going to play a hybrid edge for one of the proudest programs in the state of Texas, and Denton Geyer, some 7-tech, some wide 9, maybe some off-ball linebacker. Fascinating considering the athletic profile. But then, again, a testament to his talents. The guy's also going to play some two-way snaps as a tight end. And keep in mind, folks, Geyer has a high-level rising senior tight end recruit who has quality group of 5 offers. So they don't technically need him to play tight end, and yet they're going to let him play both sides of the ball. But I think the best thing about Zane Rowe, in my opinion, is not just the athletic profile or what he can do. It's the mentality. He's wise beyond his years, and if you read the commit story that I published whenever he announced, one of the most fascinating things to me is he talked about how he likes to play tight end, not because of receiving yards or touchdowns. He wants to and attention away from his teammates so they can get the ball in favorable situations. Asked him what he loves about defense. It wasn't about the sacks, the tackles for loss, the individual statistics. He said he likes to just hit people, disrupt game plans. You just don't hear rising sophomores talk that way, Emily. So I love this guy, one of my favorite recruits I've ever covered. And if you're Oklahoma, you take him right now. Dare I say get excited, too, about a 2027 because I think he's a special talent, a really special kid.
Wow, they have lots of time to learn more about him, but from what you've told us so far, sounds like a really special kid. Looking forward to seeing what happens with the rest of his high school career, and then when he suits up for the Sooners in a decade or so. Seems like it's going to be a long time from now. Let's hop in the portal real quick, because things do close up shop tomorrow. TCU defensive lineman Demonic Williams, top 10 name in my book, but a priority for the Sooners to lock him up. What's the latest in their recruitment of him?
Yeah, we're entering the home stretch here for one of the most coveted players in the transfer portal. We'll visit LSU, I believe, beginning tonight, so our guys over at Go 24/7, I'm sure, will have this thing covered. But then it's almost decision time for this guy. Now, you hear some rumblings. He may make the final call as early as this Wednesday, but it is worth noting, just because the transfer portal window is closing doesn't mean decisions have to be made. And kind of my personal belief, if you're a coveted defensive lineman in the transfer portal, no need to rush into any decision. You have the ability to navigate the process, and rightfully so. So for Dominic Williams, it's still kind of a mixed pot. You got Texas, you've got Missouri, LSU visit beginning soon. Oregon has generated some buzz a time or two. But then you mentioned Oklahoma, and it's fascinating to me because immediately upon entering the transfer portal, he gets that OU visit scheduled. At the time, it was the only multi-day trip he had on the slate. Spent about 3 days in Norman for OU spring game weekend. Went incredibly well, productive meeting with the coaching staff. It seemed like they were almost close to getting the deal done, but he left campus uncommitted, and you just kind of wait and see what happens from there. But what I want to say, OU is very optimistic because even though his attention went elsewhere during these visits, interesting little nugget, as Dominic Williams was visiting a different program, Oklahoma became the first ever offer for his younger brother. And so a very special moment created by the Sooners while Dominic and his younger brother are elsewhere, continuing to try to further that relationship. And going back to the beginning of this thing, OU prioritizes that relational aspect, so we'll see if it pays off. One of the best transfer portal defensive tackles available.
Love the strategy there, and I appreciate you pointing out, too, just from a defensive line standpoint, it seems like those guys are just the belle of the ball in this transfer portal. So, yeah, he can take his time, although I'm sure Sooners fans would like to have this one wrapped up sooner. That was intentional, rather than later. CK, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. You can read more of his work at SoonersIllustrated.com. They have updates on spring practice, transfer portal, all the recruiting news that you could possibly want. Check it out on SoonersIllustrated.com. From one former Big 12 team to one current, Kansas State. The Wildcats just got better over the weekend, adding Colorado transfer running back Dylan Edwards. Edwards led the Buffs in rushing as a true freshman last season and has a lot of football left in him. Let's welcome in 24/7 Sports National College Football reporter Matt Zenitz to get us the latest on all things transfer portal. And Matt, let's start right there. Dylan Edwards to Kansas State. How did it all go down?
So first of all, just to backtrack and look at, I guess, the falling out with Colorado. So everyone obviously remembers the big first game for Dylan in Colorado last season, and Dylan put up 4 touchdowns in that big win over TCU, and then progressively during the course of the year, production fell off. Colorado deemed it a priority to add to it during the course of this spring portal cycle. That didn't go unnoticed with Dylan. And after Colorado added a different running back, Dallin Hayden, all of a sudden there were progressive rumblings in terms of the possibility of Dylan going into the portal. He ends up making that move. He's somebody from the state of Kansas, as it was put to me by a Kansas State source in the last couple of days, had visited with them seemingly a million times leading up to this most recent visit. But on this one, it seemed like he was taking their presentations even more seriously and paying even more attention than he had in the past. And ultimately, within 24 hours, was locked in to Kansas State and now set to be a part of an offense for moving forward that has him there with a high upside young quarterback in Avery Johnson, and then DJ Giddens coming back at the running back position also, who's coming off a 1,200-yard season.
Not too shabby. That's a pretty good backfield for those Wildcats. And at one point, Edwards was committed to Kansas State during his recruitment. So there is that connection there. For the record, Kansas State plays at Colorado on October 12th. So go ahead, mark your calendars now. It's going to be a fun little rematch there. Just looking in total, there's so many players that have hit the portal, especially during this spring window, and there's still so many uncommitted prospects. Although the portal window closes tomorrow, there's still more recruitments that can happen after that, so that means that no more players can go in, but you're still tracking those recruitments. So who are some uncommitted prospects that you're still monitoring now?
Yes, I guess we can start with the number one available prospect for us, Jason Zandamela, who is actually a true freshman. Was in the 2024 recruiting class and had signed with USC, went into the portal, and it became clear very quickly that wanted to get back closer to home. He's from the state of Florida, and right now it's a UCF-Florida battle with Florida progressively on my end during the course of the last few days becoming the, I guess you could say, clear favorite at this point, even though UCF by no means do they feel like they're out of it right now. I would say another one to go along with that a lot of teams around the country are monitoring is Takario Davis at Arizona, a corner who's been in the portal for a while at this point. Arizona, and this is a conversation that I had as recently as today, Arizona is still optimistic about keeping him, even though he has not told them 100% what he's doing, but hopeful that they're going to be able to get him to withdraw from the portal at some point in the next couple of days. And then I guess I'll end on Derek Harmon, who is the top defensive lineman in the transfer portal at this point. Derek was a big-time player for Michigan State and has been very popular since entering the portal, just like he was when he went in during the winter cycle before ultimately returning to Michigan State. The teams coming up most on my end right now, one, USC. USC hosted him for a visit going back to the end of last week, and he also visited Colorado over the weekend. That there are some schools involved and that have interest in him that feel like Ohio State may be lurking there kind of quietly, but don't have anything definitive on that yet on my end. But hey, had been set to visit Miami the early part of this week. That visit is no longer happening, and there are some other schools that have had interest, like Florida State, LSU, that were hoping to get visits locked in that have been unsuccessful doing that thus far.
Once again, those uncommitted prospects have time till they have to commit, but for people entering the portal, that window officially closes tomorrow, Tuesday at midnight. But I like that you and Chris Hummer clarified in a report that for grad transfers, they have one additional day, and we could see some stragglers as compliance works with the paperwork and everything. But in terms of last-minute entrants, are there some names that we should keep an eye out for?
Well, the biggest thing I would say is just what you just touched on. You gave me a nice segue there, so I appreciate that. So it's important to keep in mind that even though the portal technically closes tomorrow, first of all, compliance offices have 48 hours to actually process entry, so we're still going to be seeing players hitting the portal as far as undergraduates through Thursday. But then Chris and I also learned today that the NCAA has something that they put into effect for graduate transfers, that after initially presenting things like graduate transfers would be on the same timeline and that they would have the same deadline as undergrads, that actually they have one extra day to make a decision. So graduate transfers have until the end of the day Wednesday to submit their paperwork to compliance, and then compliance again has the 48 hours to process entries. So with grad transfers specifically, we could still see some of those guys entering the portal, hitting the portal as late as Friday.
If it sounds confusing, it's because it is. That's why we have you on the show to talk about it, and that's why you are a must follow this time of year and really throughout the year with all the breaking news. Along those lines, you follow literally all of it, and it's very impressive to see all the updates. So just looking at this portal window as a whole, I'm curious from your perspective, I'm going to put you on the spot here, which team do you think did the best job of taking advantage of this spring portal window?
I have recency bias a little bit, so I'll go with Miami. So Miami has definitely been hot the last few days, and obviously have the rundown there. Just in the last couple of days alone, add one of the top running backs in the country, and Damian Martinez, a two-time All Pac-12 selection. Add Sam Brown, arguably the top wide receiver to go into the portal this cycle. Add a starting linebacker from Louisville, Jalen Alderman, who reunites with his former linebacker coach, Derek Nicholson. And then also to go along with those three, bring in an under-the-radar cornerback from Marshall, Deani Hill, who, even though the majority of the country probably has no idea who Deani is, and I won't hold or we will not hold that against you if the name doesn't immediately ring a bell. But I will say with Deani, they're talented enough that he was getting interest from several Power 4 teams to go along with Miami, including at least one that comes to mind in the SEC. So a sleeper, nice under-the-radar pickup for them to go along with the aforementioned three. And the word that I've gotten out of the Miami camp is that from a portal standpoint, they very well may not be done yet.
Hey, you look at this spring portal window as a place to add depth, not necessarily starters, but looking at that list of the Miami transfer pickups, they added starters during this portal window. Matt, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. We are going to officially tie a bow on the transfer portal in this cycle tomorrow, right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page at 5 Eastern for Transfer Portal Tracker. We will recap the biggest storylines with our insiders. One last call today, though, to make sure you hit the like button on the way out and that you are subscribed so you don't miss a moment. Thanks for watching.